Alrighty, so I'm recording this before the start of the semester, mostly because there's been a handful of you that have actually submitted the code along for section 1, and so I thought, okay, it's a good time for me to release this. So if you're not used to this yet, just know that starting, of course, you won't see this without doing the following, but this course is set up sequentially. So that in order for you to get to week 2, which I will publish as soon as I finish the video here, you will have to complete the code along. And then, of course, to get to the code along, you had to have completed the start here. So just know that if you're wondering why something's not showing up, that's probably because you haven't completed something in the section before. Okay, so here we are in week 2, and our first item, all right, we're getting used to the due dates of a Monday and a Thursday, right? So our first item is code along for section 2. Okay, so here are the written instructions, and of course this is the video that you're watching that supports this concept. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Visual Studio Code, but let's go ahead and read this. Maybe this will be a little more helpful, and then show you is in your private repo. So anytime you do the code along work, I can't imagine, but most of the time we're going to be using your private repo to code along with the Udemy course. So create a new folder in the existing Udemy folder and name it S2. S3 will be next week. So let me go ahead and open up Visual Studio. So if you have, and I'm suspecting you have, closed your editor since the last time you coded up something, what you could do is a couple things here. You could either open the folder, right? Or if you do File and you do Recent, you will see, I suspect I have a lot more recent than you do, but gosh knows, it really depends on how much coding you do. But for me, I put my 95 directory in my desktop, right? So I could do it that way, totally. And if I open that, as we've seen before, now in this case, here are the files that you'll code along, right? So now, when you're here, remember you go into terminal and you can drop into the terminal here. I've also shown how when you have a file open, now this happens to be the last one, you can run without debugging and then it will just run that code. I have really noticed that for some reason, I like being in Bash and I like typing Python and then the name of the file. But here's what's key is, and now, if you want, you can do it whichever way you want, right? I don't really care. And again, you're watching him do it a little differently in the videos, but you're using a full IDE, so you can definitely take advantage of that here. I just find the output's too much, and I'm sure I could fix that as well. But for today, I would just want to run it at the command line because I like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear mine because that information showing up was just in the Mac side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change because I'm going to do ls. So I'm going to look at the folders because remember, I have mine open at that folder level that contains both my private and my public. Now I could just open my private folder within there and then that's the only thing I would see. Totally okay to do that as well. I typically just leave them like this because I move back and forth, but if you wanted to, you could totally open, right? And then go to your private one. I think that's in the right one. I have multiple, so I have to be a little bit careful. So I could open the private one. And then when I do open it from there, then I would only see those files, right? Totally do that. But I'm going to move back the way I generally like to do it because that's how I have my setup. And again, this is the stuff you figure out based on your own preference. And generally what you do is, does it work? Then you leave it. But it's also good to think about it. Okay, so now here's the last file that I wrote with this PI. Again, I could just run it from here, but what I like to do is run it from the command line. And I ran into a little bit of an issue on this one, and you may not. If you're on a Mac, you might, and I talked about this a little bit, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to clear out my terminal. Again, if you don't remember, it's terminal, new terminal. But again, you should probably watch this before you do the code because it gives you that concept of what we're doing, right? So let's go back here. because I'm kind of popping around and I want to slow down and make sure I cover all this, right? So now what you're going to do, now that I've opened up the editor and I've told you here, I've created a directory inside my Udemy. And again, the key here is getting used to this interface and knowing if you've clicked into this and then you create a new folder, it's not going to go where you want. But it's okay if you do it because you can just delete it. But what you want to do is click on the Udemy and then click on the new folder and then type S2. And then inside of that folder, and by the way, all I did there is I hit escape. You're going to create the files as you're coding along with the lecture that he's doing. Okay. So, and here are the files you're going to end up with, right? Now, to be clear, and I'm going to move over right now into the section. Right? So video 4 is concepts. And by the way, these are really fundamental concepts to coding, no matter what language you're doing. And we're covering a lot of really important concepts here. So taking a little bit of time and really understanding this is helpful. And the videos aren't necessarily that long, right? And so what you want to do, the first one's concept, and then 5, 6, and 7, you're coding along with these. So at the end of each of them, what you're going to do is do the Git workflow, right? So that you finish this, you do the Git workflow, and you can add it into your local repo. And then when you're done with 7, you will push those into GitHub, okay? But let me just say, so hopefully you got that, right? So and I'm going to have you submit your commits this time, which will be different than section 1. Right? And I said this after each video, commit your code into the local repo. And what that means is you don't have to push your code into GitHub. You just have to commit it into the local repo. And then once you're complete with all the videos, then you can push it to GitHub and then provide me a link to the commits. Okay? And I'll show you that in a minute. And I'm saying here, just basically what I was saying is that only 5, 6, and 7 have code. So you should have 3 commits. And that way I can see all the code that you wrote for that section. So now let me just go back into my editor and say a few words about because he's gonna like write some code and then get rid of it. I often like to, and I think this is a good thing, is once you write code, if he's rewriting it, I actually like to comment it out because I like to have it for reference. Remember, your code is your notes for later on when you want to review what was talked about. And so what you can do is once you've coded something, you can highlight it. Again, the benefit of the editor, learn some keystrokes if you want, but you can either do a line or a block comment, and you can see what these look like. So this is a block comment here, right? So you can totally do that. And that's what I expect to see in your code is like when he deletes something, just comment it out and rewrite it, because I'm telling you, it's just good muscle memory to do a little, even if it's a duplicate. I mean, you can totally cut and paste if you wanted, but just the more you write code, the more your muscle memory builds. Okay. Okay, so that's just, so here are the files that you're going to end up with. And then again, I'll show you what the commits, how you'll submit the commits once you've completed the code along. But before I do that, let me just say a word here about running it. So I showed last time how, and you've loaded the Python extension into your VS Code. And remember, the interface and the idle that he is showing is definitely a backup. If for some reason you have some challenges in here, that's going to be a reason for you to come to one of my office hours. And I'll talk about that. I've talked about that in attendance, so go check that out. But in here, right, I can run it just by doing with debugging, which we'll learn later. So you can either use the keyboard shortcut, depending on your OS here, is I can run this and it's going to run whatever is active in my editor. So if you have another file, remember, whatever is active is what is running. That's the first thing. And then I've noticed here, and this is something you get used to when you're doing that too, is that if you want to get to bash for some reason, you come back here to get to bash. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the way I do it. And I'm not sure why I like doing it this way, but I really do. There's something about it. So for me, I actually like to run Python from the command line. And I could do it both ways, but I'll tell you what, for me, there's a lot there. And all I really want to see is my output. And I'm sure that I could change Visual Studio Code to do that. But for today, I just want to give you an alternative, but also highlight something some of you may run into. So I'm going to go back here because again, this is now the alternative way I showed is I'm actually going to change into the directory that I'm working. Because remember, I've opened that subdirectory. I'm going to change into my private repo. And now again, I'm using these tabs when I type part of the directory. So change directory. And in here, if I didn't, I'd hit LS and I go, yeah, I want to go into the Udemy. Now here, I know I want to go into S3, S2 because I've already set it up. So if you didn't remember, you could do that as well. And so here, oh yeah, there are all my files. And I'm just going to do a clear real quick to put that. So now what I like to do is Python and then the name of whatever the file I'm running. Okay, so like 5, there we go. Now, I ran into a little bit of an issue when I was running the your name one because when it was running in the your name one, it actually gave me an error. And it was like, it took me a few minutes to figure this out. So hopefully, again, this may happen more likely on a Mac versus a PC, but it's just good to know in case you ever see this. One of the things that happens, and I'm going to fix this afterwards, but for today, I'm just going to show you, is if you do on the command, on the bash, on the terminal in Visual Studio Code, if you type -- version, right, you need to make sure you're running the version that is actually running here, because there could be a possibility, depending on what your system is set up. Again, we all have unique systems, that you may be running an old version, and I was actually doing that. So I had to actually go into my settings file and fix it. Okay, I ended up changing. I had to play with it a little bit, but anyway, I don't know if it's totally fixed. But for now I can do Python and I can run 5 times, and then boom, it works fine. So I just want to give you some of these things that you could run into because, I don't want you to have to spend a lot of time if you run into the issues like that. That's where you reach out for help, or hopefully if you're watching videos before, and I recommend you do, before you do the work, I'll give you a heads up where I see that. Okay. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and clear. I've talked about how you do it, commits after each one, right? So remember, Git Add, and then you can either do start if you're, whatever files are setting out there. Remember, and we'll talk about this later, this interface also Visual Studio works, but I think working at the command line is best. So even if you're running Python from here, still using bash to do Git, I think is helpful in the beginning. And then later on, because again, you're going to want to know how to use the command line. So I'm going to do a git status, and here, because I've already done the process of git adding my files. My alternative would be, now I could do git add and I could just do 5 times, right? Or I could do, let me just clear this because sometimes there's just too much on this screen. So I'm going to do git add. And I could do star, which says everything that's been modified. So add that to my local system, okay? Or I could do it like that, right? Now, in this case, if I do, remember, use your up arrows to make your life easier. I'm like, oh, yeah, I've modified that file. I've added those changes. Now I've staged them. So I need to do a git commit -m, right? Now, here's what I want you to do. Code along, right? Section 2, and then video, whichever video you're doing. So that way, because I'm lining it up and looking at your code, right? So if it's video 7, that's great, okay? But again, you'll do that for 5. You'll do 5, 6, and 7. So you'll have 3 of these. Now, once you finish all of them, now you can do your git push, okay? Cool. So now you can do your git push, which pushes your code out to GitHub. So the key there, for the first week, I'm not going to be a stickler, but as we go forward, if you forget to do one, not a big deal. But again, as the weeks go forward, I want you to build this into your workflow, your process, right? Okay, so now that you have all that done, right, you have a submit button on yours. And that submit button, and you've seen this before, you're going to submit a URL. So let me go over to my GitHub. Now that I've pushed my code out to GitHub, I've checked to see if it's there. I'm like, yeah, there it is. Cool. I wasn't doing the best example because I didn't do it after each one. I realized after, and I'm like, oh yeah, gotta talk about that, right? So what I want you to do here, now that you're looking at these, you've confirmed that's what it is, click on history. So what you'll end up doing here is you're going to give me the commit history, and it's going to, and this is the URL that you're going to give me. So notice it looks a little different than the one you did before. Not a big deal. It just takes me right to your commit so I can then clearly go see and look at the code that you're submitting. All right, so you copy that, you come back into here, you hit submit, you give me the URL, and then you're good to go. By the way, good idea here, and you'll hear me talk about this through this course, is working ahead a little bit's always great. I try to grade as I see things come in, and I for sure grade each morning. So if for some reason you miss something and you submit it before the due date, right, I'm going to give you that feedback, and you can, if you have time, fix it. But if you're working right at the due date, which I get, sometimes that's just the way your workflow works, you don't have that opportunity. Okay, I know it's a lot of information. As we go through these code along videos, will probably either be non-existent, you'll just have which ones you need to cover, but I also like to talk about when we get a little further back or further in, right, some of the things that pop up. And so now, and this is what I want to just give you my workflow just so you know, now that I've done this, now I'm going to think about how can we take what we've learned in this code along for section 2, how can we take this and kind of take it to another experience level so that you can get the experience of writing more code. So that's what I'll work on next. All right, thanks. Talk to you soon.